Hi, my name is Mary Hixson. I'm the Family Consumer Science Agent over in Gary County, Kentucky. And I'm here today with my co-worker, Rita Stewart, who's the FCS agent here in Lincoln County. And today we're here to talk about using pre-cuts to do some quilting projects. We're going to focus on 2.5-inch strips, but you can buy 2.5 strips already cut, or you can cut them yourself. And today we're going to use our 2.5-inch strips to create a traditional quilt pattern called Courthouse Steps. And I'm going to let my friend Rita take over.
Great, thank you, Mary. Today I'd love to share with you our samples that we have made. We are using 3 or 4 blocks to make either a table topper, it could also be a wall hanging, or a table runner, or possibly a placemat if you wanted to do placemats. We'll show you exactly how to do that in just a few minutes. However, right now I'd love for us to look at a few samples. This is what we typically think of as a traditional Courthouse Steps pattern. It is very traditional in that we are repeating the same color in the same spots on the lights and the darks. And this is put together to be a table topper or a wall hanging. So this is a very planned traditional Courthouse Steps pattern. If you look at the other sample that we have hanging, this is also planned, but this is more of a modern take on the Courthouse Steps. And yes, these two are made exactly the same way using the same pattern, but it's all in how we plan and place our fabric strips. This one has more of that clamshells effect with our squares, but again, this is 4 squares Courthouse Steps pattern, same as this one is 4 squares Courthouse Steps pattern. Both of these are planned, but planned in a very different way. I'd like to show you one other option, and that is using only 2 or 3 colors to construct your block. This is a 2-color block. All of the lights in this case and all of your darks are the same color, including your center square. This is another option, again made exactly the same way. The last one we'd like to share with you at this point is a 3-color design. This is a very modern approach to the Courthouse Steps, with the center square being a different color, and then again your light side and your dark sides. So again, a 3-color option. Now what we'd like to show you next is how we took this 3-color block and we're going to put it together and make a table runner from it.
And this is what it looks like when we lay our blocks like this. And this is what it looks like when we place the block like this. And when we turn our blocks different directions, we can have our table runner look like this. And now, when we add this extra strip and place it in between our blocks, we get this design. This is the same design as the last one, but with multicolor fabric pieces. Here it is in a placemat, and here's what it can look like in a table runner.
Rita, we've noticed and looked at several options for putting together the Courthouse Steps pattern. So how do we sew it together? Can you show us those steps?
All right, sure thing, Mary. I'd love to do that. As you can see, I have laid out in front of me all the pattern pieces. They've been cut to size. And I think it's always a good idea to lay out your pattern pieces to make sure that you have your lights on the proper side and your darks on the proper side as well. So we wanted to start with our center, and we would take our center square and we would pick up and sew on to each of the lights. So if we were using this as a demo, we would pick this one up and flip it over onto the dark square in the center, and then we would stitch right down through here. And we would do the same thing with the other light on this side, and that is going to give you this little piece right here. Okay. So you're going to end up with this. And at that point, we are going to lay that back down. We're going to press, and we will press away from the center. The whole time we're making the Courthouse Steps block, we're going to press away from the center. So as you can see, I have that one already pressed away from the center. And then we would lay it back down. I like to lay my pieces back down each time, and then we're ready to pick up our next piece. The great thing, one of my favorite things about the Courthouse Steps patterns, when you lay it down, there's only one piece that will fit. If I try to sew this piece on, it's going to be too large. This piece is the next one. It's a 6.5 inch strip by 2.5, and that one is going to get sewn on next. So I would take this to the sewing machine, sew that seam just as we did, and then we're ready to press. And I'd like to show you guys how to press your seams. If we could do that, we're going to move over to the iron, and you want to make sure that you have your iron ready to go, and you want to lay your piece down onto your ironing mat and surface. And then the first thing we want to do is we want to set our stitches. So we're just going to set the iron down on our stitches, and that just helps to set those. At that point, we want to again press away from the center. So here is our center block. We want to make sure we're pressing towards this piece that we added on. Very, very important. So I'm going to set my stitches. Whichever piece that I want to have my seam going towards, if I place it on the top, my seam will always go towards that piece. So I'm going to flip it back, and I'm going to take my fingers and very gently just finger press that over. I don't want to have any overlap of that, and then I can take my iron and I'm just going to very gently lay that down on that seam.
Now Rita, what's the difference between pressing that in our quilting class as opposed to ironing it?
Very good question, Mary. A lot of times when we're ironing clothes, we just iron. And we want to make sure that we're actually pressing. Ironing, we sometimes will move the iron around a lot. With this, we're just mainly nudging that seam and setting the iron down. We want to make sure that we're not stretching or pushing against that seam as we're pressing. So it's more of a press it back with your fingers and just gently press that back towards that. At this point, we can lay this back down, and we're ready to proceed to the next step, which would be to take the first the next 6.5 inch strip and put that on, and then we would stitch that on as well. And then again, press away from the center.
Rita, what's the difference between this pattern, our sewing procedure, and the log cabin, the traditional log cabin pattern?
Again, great question. With your traditional log cabin, you would start out in the center, and then we would actually sew around. We would start adding our logs or strips, and we would go around the center. With the Courthouse Steps, you'll notice that I sewed on my 2 lights, and then we went to the opposite side and sewed on a dark. So rather than going around the center, we are going from side to side. So we'll go from here to the next side, this side, then back to the opposite side. So as you always sew on 2 and then the other 2 on a different side. Does that answer your question, Mary?
That does, thank you.
Awesome. So we would continue, if we were making this block, we would continue sewing, going from side to side and adding the blocks as they fit. until we have all of these sewn together, and then we will have a completed block. And at that point, we can decide whether we want to make 3 blocks or 4 blocks and how we might want that to be put together. This is our last option. So Mary, what makes this one so special?
This one, Rita, is a scrappy version, and you can still see that it is the courthouse square pattern. We have our centers, and then we have our sides as we build around, but I've made this scrappy, which means that there was not any set plan on where we put the colors, okay? But there really was a plan because we wanted it to come out right in our centers, okay? The blocks have also been turned. You can see that this one is going this way, and then this one is going the other way, okay? This is ready for me to quilt. You can see that I have batting already attached to the back of it, and then there's backing on this. There's pins in here, and the next thing I will do is I will quilt this. I'll quilt it from the center, and I can do any kind of quilting I would like to do, so that's up to you to decide. But I'll quilt from the center, then I'll trim it down, trim my edges off, and then I'm ready for binding. And then we'll have a very nice fall table topper.